So we learned from the case study of Brian and his father that it's easy to do the wrong thing, to respond to people in ways that are not helpful. Well, the purpose of this lesson is to point out some of the most common poor listening responses. And I think you're going to recognize most of them. You'll notice that some of them are very obvious. They're very obviously poor listening responses, but others are more subtle. And by that I mean they seem to be okay, even good responses, when in fact they're not. So let's take a look at them. And I'd like to ask you to pay particular attention to those which you use. So one response is formulating. It's actually formulating how you're going to respond, the words that you're going to use next. And, what are you going to say? So instead of giving the speaker our full attention, we're in our own heads. We're only able to catch part of what they're saying because we're so busy thinking about our next words. And this is very common, perhaps the most common habit that most people fall into. Another habit I'm going to call disagreeing or arguing. This one's pretty obvious. You heard it in the example of Brian and his father in the last lecture. It's immediately judging what somebody is saying and telling them why they're wrong instead of hearing them out to really get to a deeper understanding of their point of view. It shuts down communication and either sets up power struggles or silence and withdrawal. Another common habit when we're listening is one-upping. You hear what somebody says, but you come back with something like, "Oh man, you think that's bad. Here's what happened to me," or "it reminds me of." And you insert your own experience into the conversation rather than creating the space for the speaker to talk. You take the conversation away from them in a sense, rather than letting the speaker feel heard. Another common response is ignoring. And this is being distracted. It's multitasking. It's simply not giving importance to what somebody has to say, or not giving them your best attention. And sometimes ignoring is very obvious, but other times it's more subtle. You're only half engaged. You act like you're listening, but you're really not. And ignoring sends others powerful message about how important they are to us. Well, another is lecturing, moralizing. And this is telling other people what they should think and feel. It's like when we get up on a little bit of a soapbox, in a sense, and we start preaching to people. It's designed to coerce or guilt others into changing their thinking or behavior, but it results in resentment. You heard Brian's dad not only disagreeing and arguing with him, but also lecturing him as well, like when he said that he should be grateful for parents who cared about his safety. So another common response when we could be listening is criticizing or comparing other people. And this one is usually pretty obvious, but it's finding fault or making negative comments about another's words, about their behavior or their character, usually to try to change them, to get them to do what we want. Another is giving advice or nifty plans, I like to call it. It's telling another person what to do or how to solve their problem. The intent is usually good, although the problem with those nifty plans is that it might not fit the speaker's situation and it fails to respect the responsibility of the speaker to solve his or her own problems. The advice will usually be rejected. People have a tendency to say, "Yeah, but." Or even if they accept it, it breeds a dependency and a lack of faith in oneself. Of course, I don't want to overstate this. There are times when advice is helpful and called for, but usually it's further into a conversation once an individual has really been heard and is receptive to input. So another of these poor listening habits is fixing. This is taking over or doing for somebody something that they could or should be doing for themselves. Communicates that the person is less capable than you, and it deprives them, again, of opportunities to learn and to grow. Another is sympathizing. And by the way, that's not to be confused with empathy. Sympathy is feeling sorry for someone. It may seem caring, but it reinforces a person's complaining. It reinforces their negative feelings. It really isn't caring. It rewards them for feeling bad instead of taking action. So another poor listening response, and I know there are a lot of them I'm sharing with you, but there are a lot that we do on a day-to-day basis. It's rescuing or even soothing. Similar to sympathizing, this is trying to make a person feel better rather than allowing them to own their experience. Rescuing can include making somebody feel better by trying to minimize what they've done or even undo the consequences of their actions. It's trying to tell them everything will be okay. It's imposing your thoughts and judgments, telling them how they should feel rather than just being a good, safe place where they can open up and talk about their experience. Choosing sides. This is deciding that somebody is right and somebody else is wrong, instead of going for a deeper understanding and allowing someone to talk through, or a group of people, a couple of people, to talk through their differences. It's deciding that you already know who's right and who's wrong, and it perpetuates feelings of injustice and lack of understanding of each person's point of view. Well, all of these responses are pretty common, and all of them prevent good listening. I want to suggest they cause 3 harms. Number 1, they invalidate the feelings and experience of the speaker. They cut off the speaker and don't allow him or her to fully express themselves. Second, they make it unsafe for someone to talk, and so they close down communication. And third, they rob the speaker of self-responsibility. And what do I mean by this third point? Good listening keeps responsibility where it belongs, on the speaker. The speaker owns his or her opinions and experience, and is also responsible to solve his or her problems. You acknowledge this as you use good listening. When you don't use good listening, you step over a boundary by trying to tell someone what to think, how to feel, and how to act. Now, there are times when people need clear limits. Children, for example, or maybe it's an employee, somebody who works for you. They may need you to set limits. They may need you to provide guidance and training or help in solving their problems. But usually it comes after you've made it safe for them to talk and after you've taken time to listen. A rule of thumb is that listening and trust building precede problem solving. Even though a speaker may need your support and help at some point in the process, don't forget that they own their lives and their behavior and are ultimately responsible for their experience and actions. So I want to invite you to pay more attention to how you respond as you listen, what you're doing, and whether it's helpful or whether it's harmful. So in the next lesson, in the last lesson of the program, I'm going to be teaching you the listening skill, the how of listening.